Okay, here we go. This is the human eye. This is the lacrimal gland. Lacrimal gland is superolateral. It means top and side. Superolateral.
Is it on both sides?
Nope. It's just so
Medial?
it's not superomedial. It's only superolateral.
Oh, on the outside.
Superolateral. You cry from the top side across your eye. It collects in your ducts, runs into your nose, and that's why your nose runs. All right. So that's the superolateral. That's a lacrimal gland.
So is that a right eye?
This is the right eye, and you can tell by that's that's how you should orient this. This white stuff here is called the sclera. It's part of what we call the fibrous tunic. Muscles insert on it, as you can see. Look at all these muscles inserting on it. I think you have to know those muscles. This is the sclera. Allison, if you can't see, let me know. This white stuff is the sclera. Same with you, Michelle. If you can't see, let me know. Sclera. Choroid. I have to take this apart to see the choroid. The choroid, okay, this is not good for us in this sense, in one sense. In one sense, you can see the three layers here. They're not color-coded. You have the fibrous tunic, which is the sclera. You have the vascular tunic, which is the choroid, and I can see it in the middle. Then you have the neural tunic, which is the retina. This choroid is here, but it's not shown well. So I'll pick up this eye and now look at it. The sclera is white. The choroid is pink, and the retina is yellow-orange. Those are the three layers to the eye. Sclera, choroid, and retina. Sclera is white, choroid is that pinkish area, and the retina is that yellow-orange area.
Okay.
So, obviously, if you look at both these eyes closed, you can see all three layers in both of them. One's color-coded, one's not. That's the problem. All right? Retina. We already did the retina. The retina is right back here at the back of the eye. Right back here.
Did you? I don't remember you doing
Yeah, when I did the three layers.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's the retina.
Okay.
And on here, the retina is just this white area right here. Right there. Okay? Cornea. Okay, the cornea comes off all these eyes. But be careful you don't confuse the cornea with the lens. That's the cornea. Okay, now watch me show you how you sometimes confuse the cornea with the lens. Here's the cornea off. The cornea's gone. There's the lens. The lens is behind the pupil. This is the cornea. All right? When you look through the cornea, you see the muscle of the eye called the iris. Let's see what's next. The pupil is the hole. Now, I can't take this cornea off, but this cornea comes off. So let me show you here. I'm taking the cornea off. Put it down. I still haven't taken the lens off. Well, I just did, but I'm going to put it back. The pupil is the hole. There's two muscles of this eye, and the pupil is the hole. All right? You're stretching or looking? Pupil. All right. The iris is this muscle of the eye. There's actually two layers to that muscle. There's pupillary sphincter and pupillary dilator muscles, but just know that is the iris. The lens is behind the pupil. That's the lens. If you dissect the cow eye today, I'm sorry. I'll tell you in a second. I got more to tell you about dissection, so I'll tell you in a second. That's the lens. That now.
So the cornea is the outermost.
Right.
Okay.
If someone pokes you in the eye, they just poke you in the cornea.
When they do cataract surgery, they're replacing the lens.
Not always. Sometimes they shave off the cornea. Because if they reshape the cornea, they can bend light. Sometimes they reshape the lens. Sometimes they reshape the cornea. Sometimes they reshape the lens. So they don't always go into the lens. Sometimes they just reshape the cornea.
What are they doing with LASIK?
That's what he's talking about.
Oh, okay.
There's different types of LASIK, and that's what he's talking about. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know which exact surgery you're talking about. They do them both. Hooked to this lens is this muscle right here called the ciliary muscle. Actually, we call the whole thing the ciliary body. I'm going to turn it and face you guys. It looks like it looks ribbed or I guess ribbed, I don't know a better word. It's that ciliary muscle right there. It's hooked to the lens. In this eye, it's pink. In this eye, let me put the lens back in so you can see how it's hooked to the lens. In this eye is black. That black stuff is the ciliary body. Ciliary body is a muscle that the oculomotor nerve hits to shape your lens. By the way, the answer to your oculomotor nerve today, parasympathetic function, was ciliary body or pupil or iris. That's the parasympathetic function of that nerve. Optic nerve, really easy. Well, not easy on this eye, it's not there. Optic nerve on this eye is this right here. Coming out the back, the optic nerve.
So the whole, like the yellow thing? The whole thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Remember what nerves are. They're thousands of neurons.
Oh, right.
Remember, nerves have blood vessels. Remember what a nerve is. That whole thing's... Now I lost my lens. That whole thing is the optic nerve right there.
Okay.
Cranial nerve number 2. Function is vision. That was on the quiz today. Okay, now this gets harder a little bit now. So let me go back in here and put this lens back in here. Okay, so this gets a little more challenging conceptually. I have a space behind that cornea. Between the cornea and the iris, I have a space. All right? And then I have a space back here that this actually represents.
Huh.
This represents that space in the back.
Oh, so it's not an eyeball. That's not the eyeball?
No.
Oh.
This is...
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay, so let me take this apart for you. There's 2 spaces in this eye. The space between this cornea and the lens. The space between the cornea and the lens. And the space represented behind the lens, represented by this whole thing. By the way, the lens on this model fits into, this is how they made it. They made the lens fit in like that. The only way to hold it in place. All right? So where am I at? Okay. So now what I have here is this. I have my anterior cavity, which is between the cornea and the lens. Everything between the cornea and the lens is the anterior cavity. Everything behind the lens is the posterior cavity. Easy enough so far, right? My anterior cavity contains aqueous humor and my posterior cavity contains vitreous humor. Here's where it gets hard. My anterior cavity is split into 2 compartments. My anterior cavity only is split into 2 compartments. They are the anterior compartment and the posterior compartment. So let me say that again. The anterior cavity has 2 compartments, anterior compartment and posterior compartment. The posterior compartment is anterior to the posterior cavity.
Oh, that's confusing.
Yeah, so listen,
Why?
I'll say it again. So there's 2 cavities, the anterior cavity between the cornea and the lens. Between the cornea and the lens is the anterior cavity, and this big plastic thing is the posterior cavity.
Okay.
But that's easy. But my anterior cavity is split into my anterior compartment and my posterior compartment. So now let me grab this eyeball and show you what the anterior compartment is. The anterior compartment is between the cornea and the iris.
Oh.
The posterior compartment is through the pupil, between the pupil and the lens. There's actually 2 compartments in that anterior cavity. Between the cornea and the iris is the anterior compartment of the anterior cavity. And then if I were to poke this through here, I would say, what's that space right there? Because I'm touching the lens now through the pupil. I would say that space is the posterior compartment of the anterior cavity. Now is it easier? And then behind the posterior compartment of the anterior cavity, you have the posterior cavity.
Will you say one more time exactly what the posterior compartment is, like where it is?
Yeah, the posterior compartment is when you pass through the pupil, you're in the posterior compartment. What do you hit? Lens. So the posterior compartment is everything I'm touching in there. Through the pupil to the lens.
To the lens.
To the lens.
So not behind the lens.
No, not behind the lens.
the
Behind the lens is the posterior cavity.
Okay.
Behind the lens is posterior cavity. All right. The anterior cavity is filled with aqueous humor. The posterior cavity is filled with vitreous humor. This actually represents vitreous humor. So, I know Dave and probably a couple other people are going to cut through the eyeball today. If you cut through the eyeball, when you cut through this cornea right here, I need you to turn the eyeball downward and cut down through it. Because the aqueous humor is very watery and very watery. It might actually squirt out and hit you. The aqueous humor will come right out. But then when you're cutting through the eyeball and you get to the vitreous humor, this is very gelatinous. It won't squirt out. Matter of fact, you'll have to squeeze it out. It looks like clear jello. It's kind of snotty, gelatinous like that. If you cut through the cornea like that and squeeze that eyeball hard enough, you will pop that lens right through the pupil and out onto your tray. And it won't be clear like this lens. It's going to be a white opaque because the sheep is dead. The lens is made of a protein called crystalline. It's clear in life. It's not clear in death.
That's quite a profound statement.
All right, the muscles.
Here, wait, I want to pause.